All right, now that we've gone through the major body structures, we're going to go through the different groups of invertebrates. So far we have looked at the different kinds of chordates. We've looked at mammals and reptiles and amphibians and fish. And now we're going to focus mainly on the invertebrates. Now, invertebrate is not its own phyla. So we know they're in the animal kingdom, but then there are a lot of different phylums that the invertebrates fit into. And it is basically based on how they digest food, how many body chambers they have, and the kind of symmetry that they show. So these are the major categories, or the phyla of invertebrates that we're going to be looking at. So we'll start with porifera. Porifera is the sea sponges. Their skeleton is hydrostatic, so there's no bone or cartilage. It's mainly water pressure. Very little cellular organization, meaning they're not very complex. And they're going to move water through pores, and then the water is going to kind of sift through, and nutrients are going to get filtered out, and then it's going to shoot out the extra water out a center opening. And so it's constantly squirting water, which is kind of their process of digestion. It's getting the nutrients through. Cnidaria, when you see the word cnidaria, which has a silent C, what I want you to think is stinging. They are the ones that can sting you. So it has a hydrostatic skeleton. It is radial symmetry, which means you can cut it like a pie, and that the pieces will all be mostly equal. So like a jellyfish, you'd be able to cut this top portion like a pie because it's circular. Okay, and it's got stinging tentacles, and it comes in two forms: the medusa, which is the adult form, and the polyp, which is usually like the larva form or the infant form of some kind. Okay, and then actually one of the interesting things about the cnidaria is they can convert between these two phases and pretty much live infinitely because they're always in one of these two phases. Some example is the jellyfish, hydra, which are freshwater invertebrates. They're tiny, microscopic. The sea anemone and certain corals are going to be cnidaria. All right, platyhelminthes is a flatworm. So the first part, plat, sounds like flat, so maybe that's how you can remember it. So hydrostatic skeleton, once again, is bilateral symmetry, which means you can cut it lengthwise and it's going to be the same on each side. So more like folding a piece of paper instead of the other way. They're hermaphroditic, so kind of like the worms we've talked about, they can impregnate each other, basically. They're sometimes parasitic, like a tapeworm is going to kind of latch on to you. And they're regenerative. One of the cool things about a flatworm is you could cut them right in half and their tail will grow right back. So there's a lot of studies being done with this phyla as to how to regrow limbs and cool things like that. Okay, so tapeworm, probably the most well known. This is a planaria down here. So a lot of cool experiments can be done with planaria. They are found in fresh water. Probably would find them in the Big Sea. Alright, our nematoda is a very simple worm. This is like heartworm, basically. So they're parasitic. The one maybe you're familiar with is trichinella, which can infect lots of different kinds of mammals, usually pigs, and this is why you can't eat undercooked pork because of trichinella, because these worms are all in them. And so they basically would infect your gut and cause some problems there. Okay, mollusks. So a mollusk is something you can would have bilateral symmetry, so you can cut it down the middle. It's going to have an exoskeleton, usually more like a shell, so think like a clam. That's an exoskeleton, but it's not the same kind of material as like a grasshopper would be. There is going to be a chamber called the coelom, which is going to collect a lot of waste. It's going to have open circulatory system, but it's going to have a heart. So it's a little bit more complex, but it's not that organized. The octopus and the squid are going to be a exception to that rule. They're going to have a closed system. So they're going to have their reproductive parts in different organisms. So you are either male or female, and they're going to use gills to breathe. A mollusk is organized with a three-part body plan. So there's the visceral mass, which is just basically a mass of organs containing the stomach and the heart and the just all the basic organs. The mantle is going to be like a shell or outer exoskeleton, and then a foot is going to help it move. So in a snail, the foot is actually the main body part, but it's the part that's going to aid in movement. Okay, we can break down mollusks into three categories. The gastropod. Gastro means stomach and pod means foot. Okay, so gastropod literally means stomach foot, like a snail, basically made of a huge stomach and the foot part. Bivalves meaning they can open into two halves, like a clam. And cephalopods. Cephalo means head, so it means head foot. So that's what an octopus really is. It's just a head and a bunch of legs, right? So that would be like a squid or octopus. All right, Annelida is more complex worms. Basically, they're hydrostatic. They're segmented, which means they have a front and a back end, and they have segments that contain different organs. And then they have a nerve cord, which is the kind of development of a very simple nervous system. They have a crop and a gizzard, and they're hermaphrodites. And then the clitellum is the reproductive center. So like the earthworm that we looked at before would be an annelid, also including the leeches. So here is an annelid with the mouth region at the front. Clitellum is that round portion, and then anus being in the back. So they have a front and a back, and it's not like you could just cut it in half and both ends will regrow or anything like that. Okay, arthropods, probably one of the largest phyla because there's a lot of different kinds of arthropods. So they have an exoskeleton. They have jointed appendages, which is what their name means. Arthro means joint. Like if you have arthritis, you have joint pain. And pod means foot. So they basically have jointed feet, is what that's called. They're going to have compound eyes, so they're going to have many, many lenses on their eyes. They're able to molt and shed the exoskeleton. And there's a lot of different kinds of arthropods. And so there's different classes, the insecta, arachnids, and crustaceans. So the phylum is arthropod, and then class would be one of those three. All right, so insects are going to have a three-part body plan. They're going to have a head, thorax, and an abdomen. The thorax is the part that's connecting to the legs. They're going to have a life cycle with a larva and a pupa. All right, the next class is arachnids, and they have 8 legs. I guess we should say that insects have 6 legs, right? So now we're moving up to more legs. 4 of them are walking legs. 2 are mainly for prey capture and spinning the web, and 2 are more for just feeling around. They're going to have pinchers a lot of times. Not every kind of arachnid does, but like a scorpion would have pinchers. So spiders, scorpions, mites are going to be your main kinds of arachnids. All right, crustaceans, the big thing here is that they're going to be underwater, or they have to be in water. They're going to have 2 pair of antennae, 4 walking legs, as you can see on this lobster here, and then a pair of feeding legs, which would be the pincher set. They're going to go through a larva stage, which is called anopolis. So obviously that looks a lot different than an adult lobster. So it's going to be more see-through, more like a larva for an insect. So some examples are shrimp, crab, lobsters, and pillbugs. Pillbugs are actually land creatures, but you will find them in very moist areas. like in wet basements and things like that. So some things that are common between the invertebrates, they're going to have an exoskeleton or a hydrostatic skeleton. None of them are going to have an internal skeleton. They're going to live in moist environments because they really need that to maintain their body structure, basically. It's hard to live in a dry climate. Obviously, there's some exceptions like the scorpion and things like that, but most are going to be in some kind of moist environment. They're going to have some kind of defense, a stinger, a toxin, or their parasites to feed off you. And they're very, very simple when we open them up and look at the organs. And that is it.